Thank you for your kind words. I'm not a general. I don't know if I'm worthy to be a private, to talk to B'nai Yisrael who live in Eretz Yisrael. I'm a Yid in pain and tsar with many others. When a Yid is in pain, the mind races. I'd like to share with you this evening some of my thoughts as we stand here during a period of great sakana for Klal Yisrael on the calendar, great sakana for Klal Yisrael here in Eretz Yisrael in general. The very first cry of Yirmiyah in Eicha is Eicha Yashva Badad Ir Rabbasiyam. Eicha, how could it be Yashva Badad, that Klal Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, the HaKodesh, sits in solitude, sits lonely, sits isolated. That's the tsar with the Eicha begins with the tsar of being alone. And this year, there's an added dimension to the tsar of the Yishuv in Eretz Yisrael being alone. As the countries of the world line up to call out their votes against us, as the nations of the world protest what seems to be the greatest injustice that could be, nations get up and attack an isolated Yishuv here in Eretz Yisrael, Eicha Yashva Badad takes on a new meaning. There are countries in the world that have never seen a Jew. There are countries in the middle of Africa, and the bottom of South America, and in the United Nations, time and time again, they raise their hands against this tiny Yishuv in Eretz Yisrael. Echa Yashva Badad, how isolated we are, how we weep. But there's another Badad. It's also a first. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu compelled Bilam to bless Klal Yisrael, the very first bracha he gave was Hein Om Lavadad Yishkain Uvagayim Lo Yischashav. The very first blessing he gave us was to be Badad. Uvagayim Lo Yischashav, that's the United Nations. We count for nothing among the nations of the world. And there, it's a blessing. And the answer is that there are two types of loneliness, two types of isolation, two types of badad. There's a badad that's good, that's wonderful, and there's a badad that hurts, that's painful. Give a mashal. There's the bedidus, the loneliness of a person who lost a spouse. The badad of a widowed person. The feeling of loneliness, of abandonment, of being alone. Loneliness is painful. But worse, loneliness makes everything else more painful. When things hurt and you're alone, it hurts more. That's a badad lara. That's true loneliness. And there's a badad l'taiva. There's a wonderful loneliness, a solitude. The solitude of a young couple coming from the chuppah, going to live in an apartment, oblivious to everything going on around them. When a young couple in yeshiva is looking for a place to live, they look for a neighborhood that's matim, for couples that are similar to them, families that have the same values. For a newlywed couple, it doesn't matter. They're oblivious to their neighbors. They don't care about what's going on around them. Loneliness, it's solitude, it's peaceful, it's serenity. It's the beauty of a feeling of two people together to the exclusion of the rest of the world. So you see, there's a badad that's good, that's wonderful, that's serenity. And there's a badad that's painful, that hurts. Echa yasha badad irabasiyam hayisa kalmana. The pain is the pain of the loneliness of an almana, of someone alone. The pain is the pain of a Klal Yisrael, which feels the injustice of the world around us. We're aggravated by the statements made by the countries of the world. There's a loneliness. And then there's the badad of a family, of a Klal Yisrael, that has love one for the other, that cares one for the other, that has an appreciation for the family we're in. Eretz Yisrael will be badad mimon nafshach, one way or another. We have a choice. We can have the Yisak Almana, we can have a sense in Eretz Yisrael of machlaikis, of being ripped apart, of looking for faults one in the other. And then the badad of Yirmiyah will come through. Or we can be that couple, that family, the family of Klal Yisrael that is busy focusing one on the other with love, in serenity, oblivious to the countries of the world around us. We have a choice of bedidus. We have a choice of a bedidus of tsar, of pain, or a bedidus of ava, of love. And we don't always succeed in making the right choices. I'd like to share with you an incredible letter from Yisrael Salanter. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter wrote a letter which Rabbi Leo Dessler was privileged to see. And in the third volume of Michtav Milio, in the letters in the back, he expresses pain that he didn't copy the letter word for word. But he quotes part of it. He's writing from England to someone who's coming to Eretz Yisrael. And he writes to him that he's quoting from Yisrael Salanter's letter more than 50 years earlier. And he says, "Kesha'ata ireach be'eretz Yisrael." When you go and visit the land of Israel, al teida mi machloikis tesham. Try not to know anything of the machloiksim that take place there. Ki im teida I efsher loy lidaber. Because if you're going to know about it, you're going to talk about it. Why? For what toyeles? So Salanter was over 100 years ago. Rav Dessler, over 50 years ago. And their voices echo to us through the decades. Al teida mi machloikis tesham. Ki im rak teida I efshe shaloi ledaber. The bedidus of ava, of one yid to another, is paramount. It's the protection of Klal Yisrael. Al teida mi machloikis tesham. And in this country, it's sometimes necessary for Gedolei Yisrael to get involved in politics. But we, The Habainam, for what? For what to yell us? I remember in the 1980s, Rav Shach decided to break away from the Aguda and form Degal HaTorah, a separate political party. And one day I walked into shul in the United States for Shachris, and a friend comes over to me all excited. Did you hear what happened yesterday? What happened? In the Binyanei Ha'umah, there was a gathering to start Degal HaTorah. And Rav Shach got up to speak. And he stood at the podium for 5 minutes. He was weeping. He was crying. He could not speak. And they announced that he would speak at the end instead. And at the end, he got up to speak again. And again, he started crying and weeping. A Gadol Yisrael who was through the Gehenna of World War I and the Gehenna of World War II, and he couldn't control his emotion. He wept and he sat down. So I asked this friend who was telling me, why was Rav Shach crying and you're so excited? You're overjoyed. There's something wrong. We need to work on the bedidus hayofe, on the beautiful bedidus of a mishpacha. In the early 1960s, there was a machlokes in Yeshiva Torah Vodaas over who would become Rosh Yeshiva. And there were Yisrael on each side. My Rabbi, Rav Palm, at that time, I was in elementary school, I wasn't aware of anything. Time, Rav Palm stayed out of it, as one could predict. He came, he taught, and he went home. Came time for the Yeshiva Torah Vodaas annual dinner. The two Rosh Yeshiva in conflict sat on either side of the dais. But what about the Rebbitzins? So the powers that be decided that they would sit Rebbitzin Palm between the Rebbitzins of the two Rosh Yeshiva in conflict. Now understand, Rebbitzin Palm was totally unaware of the machlokes. She was the only person in Brooklyn totally unaware of the machlokes. And she sat there, very outgoing lady, the Shamas in Gan Eden, very talkative and pleasant. And she says, you know what I love about this yeshiva? The achdus, the friendship, the ahava. And the whole table is staring at her. Did Rav Palm get it that night? Even when Gedolei Yisrael make the choice that it's time for Teichacha, it's not time for me to be Mechiach and not time for you to be Mechiach. There's another place in the Torah where Bedidus is the first pasuk. After Moshe Rabbeinu finishes giving brachas to Klal Yisrael, in Parshas Zos HaBracha, the pasuk says, "Vayishkoin Yisrael betach bodod." Klal Yisrael shall sit in security. Rashi says, security may oyeveyem, secure from their enemies around, bodod, with bedidus. And here, the Gemara in Sanhedrin, Daf Kuf Daled, makes a point. Ani omarti, says the Rabbi Nishalayla, Ani omarti vayishkoin Yisrael betach bodod. I said Klal Yisrael should sit secure in solitude. Achshav echa yashva bodod. They didn't seize the opportunity for a real bedidus. They have the echa, the bedidus lora. The Netziv in his Pirish on the pasuk writes, Ritzaynei shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu haya sheYisrael yeh mevudadim b'kavod u'menucha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to be in Eretz Yisrael b'kavod, honored among the nations. U'menucha, and with peace of mind. V'lo yis'arvu im hagayim. Not to mix with the nations, not to care about the nations. Ata mishakilkulu v'lo yishamru al tzurasam. Nasu badad ba'ifin acher. If we don't keep the tzura, the image of bedidus that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is talking about, then there's another bedidus. I'm standing in Yerushalayim. I'm in Yerushalayim where my Zayda could only dream of visiting. I'm in Yerushalayim where the Gra dreamt of visiting. The Gra was willing to risk his life. The Gra was willing to be separated from his family. And even greater, the Gra was willing to give up time from his Heilig Limud HaTorah just to set foot in Yerushalayim. Why have we traveled 2,000 years to get here? Why have we traveled through fire and water, through pogroms and Holocaust to get here? To squabble among ourselves, to fight like children in a sandbox, to argue about whose Hechsher is better and whose Erev is better and whose Gedolim are better. This is for what we traveled. This is for what Klal Yisrael risked everything, dreaming of being in Yerushalayim for 2,000 years. For this, we dreamt of coming betach badad. We dreamt of coming back secure in our feelings, secure in our friendship and ava as one family, oblivious to what's around us, mekusher with the Rabbi Shalom. When I'm in the airplane and I daven Shemona Esrei, sometimes there's turbulence. I suspect the pilots deliberately create turbulence at Shemona Esrei. And I hold on, and I think to myself, the Talmidei Hagra who came here in rickety boats also had turbulence at sea. They also held on for dear life. They also had goyim who poked fun at them and ridiculed them. I think of myself as one with them. And you know something? It's easy to daven with turbulence in the air when you think of yourself as being on a mission of Kedusha. If you're here tonight and the Yidden who travel here in these times are coming to Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. Yerushalayim that my Zayda, my father's father, who passed away in 42, on Kiddush Hashem, he never dreamt his Einikel would be in Yerushalayim. I'm in a Yerushalayim where I could go to Kever Rachel, and my neshama could hear that Koel Barama Nishma once again. I'm in Yerushalayim where I can go to the Kaisel. We're spoiled. For centuries, parents told their children, in Eretz Yisrael, there's Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim, there's a Kaisel. Never saw it, never touched it. It's an Emunah. We have an Emunah and a Mashiach. We know that Mashiach will come, it's distant. To them, a Kaisel was distant. It was something they heard about. It was a legend that they had been Messiah. And we're able to stand here. We traveled 2,000 years to stand at the Kaisel and talk to the Rabbi Shalom. We went through fire and water to come to Yerushalayim, to walk into Yeshivas Ar Sameach and sit in awe of young men who have given up lives of plenty to come here, sacrificed friends, sacrificed a closeness of family, sacrificed a comfortable life to come, to look for the emes of Moshe emes v'Torah emes. Our success has us taking for granted what we have. We're creating a bedidus l'ra. We need to live a bedidus l'toiv, a bodod of security, of betach bodod, a security of being together, being confident, being oblivious to what's around us. Rav Palm used to comment about the United Nations. Why did God create a United Nations? Who needs it? For what purpose? Mashiach will come, and the nations of the world will be judged. And some nation in the middle of Africa will come and say, Yisrael, we didn't oppress Klal Yisrael. We were friends. We never saw a Jew in our borders. So the Rabbi Shalom created a United Nations. Stand up and say, you're with us or you're against us. Stand up and have a roll call. And when the Yom Adin comes, it'll be there. If only we had the power to be Vayishka in Yisrael, Betach Bodod. If only we had the power of being Mekaimei, Nevuas Bilam of Hein Od Lavodod Yishkain. We need to embrace the Bodod we wish. We need to embrace a bedidus that doesn't have us wasting our pain and our frustration and reading newspaper articles, even from a newspaper, that talk about the votes of the nations of the world. We need to be oblivious to it. The only reason a young couple is oblivious to what takes place around them is because they're into each other. And we too need to be into each other. My son, who was learning here in the Ir HaKodesh, said that there was a siren, apparently. But he was learning in a Beis Medrash, and he didn't hear the siren. When he got back to his dira that night, the 9 young men in the dira were arguing among each other as to whether it was true that there had been a siren here that day. That's not just an incident. It's a lesson. You see, there's a bodod of sitting and learning as well. In Eicha, Yeshev bodod v'yidaim ki notal olav. There's another bodod. In Perkei Avos, in Perek Gimel, it says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu heals the bedidus of Lomdei Torah. Even if a man is sitting and learning himself, HaKadosh Baruch Hu imai, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with him. He's not lonely. He has a bedidus l'tayv. The Shechina is lonely when there's Avodah Zarah in Eretz Yisrael. The Avodah Zarah of Kas, the Avodah of Kol HaMizgoah Kilu Oived Avodah Zarah. The bedidus of the Shechina is when there's a Jewish home that he doesn't want to visit. A Jewish home in which they're talking ill of the Rabbeinu Shalom's children is one in which he does not want to stay. I wouldn't want to stay in such a home. They spoke ill of my children, who incidentally are all wonderful and nobody speaks ill of them. And neither does the Shechina. We have to have homes where the Shechina wants to be. And then the Chayalim, soldiers who at this moment I was standing at a border, not far from here. If you get in a car, you can get there in 90 minutes. If you drive like an Israeli, in half the time. I know, because neighbors of mine have been driving there, bringing things for the soldiers. My wife has been going every day lunchtime to the Iron Dome Battery here, right outside Yerushalayim, bringing lunch. Bringing lunch. It's not a pleasant place. It's a place where there have been attempts at infiltration. It's a place where soldiers go for 2 weeks with no running water, no building, guarding the place for 24 hours. And she's gone there with a good friend of mine from Arzi Abira to bring them lunch every day. The Chayalim, the soldiers. From some are and some are not. Our connection to them is far more than our connection to the rest of the world. And it takes a war to make us realize that. The army is not coming to your home for advice on how to run the army. They're not coming to me. Whatever shortcomings there may be, my Lashon Hara is not l'tayeles. But I could tell you, this Shabbos morning, when I walked with 18 young men to daven v'sikin at the Kaisel, and I could tell you the 19 of us were the only Americans there, I was happy that there were soldiers there as well. Let's be honest. The machlokes is short-sighted. The Lashon Hara is l'lo tayeles. It causes tsar to the Shechina. It causes tsar to Yerushalayim, Ira Kodesh. Chazal talk about Yerushalayim as a person who feels pain. The Gemara says in Psachim, why aren't the hot baths of Tiberia in Yerushalayim? So no one should say, I went to Yerushalayim, the hot baths were wonderful. You come to Yerushalayim for hot baths? You come to Yerushalayim for Kedusha, for a Chibur, the city that's called Shiftei Yisrael, the only city in Eretz Yisrael that's a nachla for all the Shiftei Ka. We're in a time of pain. The pain will pass. The lessons will be forgotten. Let's think about Bedidus. Bedidus of Eretz Yisrael. Bedidus of the Shechina. There's a concept of Hisbaididus, being in solitude alone. It means alone with the Rabbi Shalom. It means alone with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, seeing Him wherever you are. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu was sitting at your table, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu were there and you could see Him, would you speak ill of other Yidden? If someone comes to me to criticize, even where criticism is deserved, of other Yidden in Eretz Yisrael, I say to him, tell me a criticism of Obama, of Arafat. Why do you have to tell me, what's that have to do with me? I spoke in a shul Leil Shabbos, and someone came over to me to complain about something that was said by a member of a certain party. He said, is it right? I said to him, there's a war going on. You have nothing better to worry about? Everything else is good? It should be common sense. You don't have to be a Navi to see that Rabbi Shalom is bringing Klal Yisrael back to Eretz Yisrael. Every decade, from another part of the world, large groups of Jews come here to Eretz Yisrael. mostly chased away by fear and anti-Semitism. It was the Iranians, it was the Ethiopians, and slowly it's become the Europeans, no doubt from the Ukraine. There will be Jews coming here. You don't have to be brilliant to see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is being Mesayvev Sibais to bring us to Eretz Yisrael. It's our choice. What type of place is this? In the late 1800s, the Netziv, who was a tremendous Oyev Eretz Yisrael, he was the head of the Chayve Veitzion at one time, he called in a Jew by the name of Wysatsky. Wysatsky was a wealthy Russian Jew who had an import-export company. And Wysatsky was called in by the Netziv. He said, Jews need parnasa. Open a tea company in Eretz Yisrael. Wysatsky was a tea importer. And Wysatsky said, Yerushalayim is hot, they're not going to drink tea. And the Netziv said, so what? But Yidden will have parnasa. And Wysatsky, who could not say no to the Netziv, did as he was implored to do, and opened the Wysatsky Tea Company here, what was then part of the Ottoman Empire. A few decades later, not long later, a dozen years later, Wysatsky in Russia was the victim of the communist turnover, the revolution. And he ran away for his life with a couple of pairs of underwear. His financial empire was gone. You know what he had left? The Wysatsky Tea Company here in Eretz Yisrael. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who has a sense of humor, no doubt, had the British take over this country within a year or two. And the British drink tea no matter what it's like outside. Bet your money on Eretz Yisrael. Bet your lives on Eretz Yisrael. A chaver asked me if it's safe to come here now. I told him it's much safer than Brooklyn. And history repeats itself. In 1950, Ben Gurion came to the United States to raise money, the original Mishulach, to raise money. He went around making appeals. But he was a wise man. He made appeals for bonds. If you ask for a donation, you get a certain amount. A bond is a loan. And he was willing to have a heter iska on his bonds, mind you. And he traveled from New York to Havana. Cuba was a country with many wealthy Jews. And they sold bonds there as well. A few years later, within the decade, there was a revolution in Cuba. And the Jews who could get out ran away with nothing. And the Knesset here voted to allow those Cubans who had bought Israeli bonds to redeem them early so they could have money to live. Bet your money on Eretz Yisrael. Invest your money here. Bet your lives here. Eretz Yisrael, the Eretz HaKodesh, needs Anshe Kodesh, needs mouths that have Kedusha, needs the beauty of what it has to offer rather than an accent on the divisions that are here. And there are divisions, and we're not going to change it. But each of us in his home could look to say what's good. When someone says what's not good, ask him about what's good. The Chassam Sofer was 15 years old. He was learning in the yeshiva of the Haflah, the Bal Haflah in Germany. And they were learning Masechtas Ksubis. Some Sefer asked his Rabbi, the Baal Afla, how could it be that the 5th parak in Ksubis is named Afal Pi? Chazal say that it's not good for a pasuk to begin with the word Af. Chazal say, Arba poschu ba'af, va'arba nevdu ba'af. There are 4 who began, there are 4 psukim in Tanakh that begin with Af, and all 4 were destroyed. Haman said, Afani, Aflohivia Esther, when he went to the Mishnah of Esther. Kairach said, Afloi al eretz ovasul cholavud vashevi yisanu. The Saraifim said, Afadi b'chaloimi. And the Nachash said, Af im toichal mimenu. Arba paschu ba'af, arba nevdu ba'af. How could there be a perek afalpi? A perek that begins with Af? The Baal Afla answered that the 13 parakim of Ksubis match the Shlosh Esrei Midais. The 13 Midais, Hashem, Hashem, that we say in Slichais, that the Malachim revealed to Moshe Rabbeinu, the Shlosh Esrei Midaya. Each one corresponds to one, and that's HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Ksuba to Klal Yisrael. And the 5th parak, Afal Pi, corresponds to Erech HaPayim, to the Erech HaPayim, Kaviyachol, the anger of heaven, and the refuah to that, the antidote to that, is Perek Afal Pi. The mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael is found where in Shas? I would have thought it would be in Mesechtes Kodshim. You need Eretz Yisrael to renew the Karbanis. In Seder Zroim, you need Eretz Yisrael for most mitzvahs hatluyos ba'aretz. No. All the sugyas of mitzvahs Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, virtually all, are found in the 13th parak of Ksubis. The 13th parak. The parak that corresponds to Vinake, the 13th midah of the Shlosh Esrei Midas. Vinake is to be purified, is to be clean, to be cleansed. V'chiper ad masai amai. We have a Messiah that even a body after death has a kapara by being in Eretz Yisrael. And certainly those who are zeichet to be here in life. V'nake. V'chiper ad masai amai. Let's look to have the Yerushalayim Yidden dreamt of for 2,000 years. The Yerushalayim Yidden faced for 2,000 years. They faced here in their davening. For 2,000 years they said, Uvenei Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh. They said, Rachem on Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh. That's here. That's us. Let's have the Yerushalayim they dreamt of. Yerushalayim of Ahava, of Ereyus. Let's have the Yerushalayim that has the betach bodod, the security of a people that's together. Bodod, if we're oblivious to what's going on around us, the Rabbi Shalom will protect us, betach bodod. Mimon nafshach, your lives will have bedidus. Either you'll have bedidus of friction and worrying about the things that cause you pain. You'll have the bedidus, the solitude. The solitude of thinking of those you love, those you care about, of Kol Am Yisrael. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who's taken us from Tsar and Sorrow before, relieve us of the horrible nightmare that's taking place now. Young B'nai Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are being killed and wounded. The Yiddish children, you see them in uniforms, you see them in tanks. They don't belong in tanks. They're sensitive. Am Yisrael, kinder of the Shvatim. They don't want to be there. They shouldn't need to be there. Im Hashem la yishmar ir, shav shakad shaimer. Let's take it seriously. Let's try from here on in to daven sim shalom with a kavana. to say, Oiseh Shalom b'mreimavu, Yaseh Shalom aleinu, to daven for them. And most of all, if we look around and see Klal Yisrael as in isolation from the Umas Ha'olam, let's all feel the Ava, the tremendous Yedidus that we're capable of. May our love, one for the other, be ma'orer a love from heaven to us, to those soldiers who are in danger in Gaza and on Gvul Gaza, and b'chol bakim shehem. May Kadosh Baruch Hu make that the year of Shemitah that's about to come should be a year of Duror, of freedom from the Tsar, the Tzukah, the pain that we have. And let us be Zaycha to be the ones that help in hastening Bias Goyel Tzedek b'mehera b'yameinu.